you so very much for joining me. I am so excited to have you here, not only because I get to drink wine with you again, like the old days, but
Yes.
to introduce you to everyone and
Yeah.
to see you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be able to share this time with you, and especially right now when it's so hard to connect at times with people. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
It's definitely nice to be able to connect and to chat and yes, witches and wine, perfect. I mean, for real, like.
Yes, totally. And if anyone out there is watching and they want to join us for a glass of wine, hurry up and go grab a glass because
Yeah.
we are going to get witchy here in a minute. So,
Okay. Yay.
yay. So, I put some questions out to my viewers just to see if they had any questions for us, for you, or for me, or whatever. And I chose 10.
Okay.
Okay, the first one.
Yeah.
I've had tons of spirits come to me. Do you tend to have spirits come to you out of the blue? And if so, how do you deal with that?
For me, it's more of a feeling thing. Like, as you know, it's more of an empathic kind of thing than actually visually seeing any spirits. But yeah, I've definitely had times where they're reaching out and saying, hey, like, notice me and that. I've never had any spirits that are unwanted or anything like that. So I've never been in a position where I've had to deal with that per se, in the sense of having to, like, whatever. But for me, it's more usually spirits that I'm already working with, or more so probably I would say the deities that I work with, especially Big C, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I've never really had a situation where I've had to be like, okay, no, you're not supposed to be here. The house is pretty well warded. That was the first thing I did when I moved in, of course, and I kind of keep those up to date. And so it's nothing unwanted is usually ever here, but I've definitely, I'm very familiar with banishing and stuff, and for if that has to happen. But I've been lucky enough not to have situations like that yet.
Okay, yes.
So knock on wood, please, no spirits showing up now. That was not, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, for myself, I mean, yeah, there's spirits around, but not in the home. Just like you, I take some precautions, but um, ever since I was little, spirits would show up, probably more so back then. Um, and at first I didn't know how to deal with it. It was kind of scary, but most not. But there was the odd one that, yeah, it seemed like they were in a loop. More like an energy imprint kind of thing. It was just the weird ones. And I just learned that you could tell them to go. One of my spirits told me you can tell them to get out. That's, that's what I say to everyone, is just tell them to go, and then you stop observing them.
Yeah.
Because if you're not noticing them, you're not acknowledging that they're there, chances are they'll go. Of course, there's other situations, and in my interview with EA Coeding, he touched on that a lot. So if anyone's interested, they can go and check out that.
But you just brought up about being younger and stuff, and I recall the first time that I saw one of my guides, actually. And I remember waking up, I was a young boy, and I remember waking up, and at the foot of my bed, there was this presence there. And I remember initially being very afraid, being a young child and not really knowing, but then all of a sudden I remember being like, oh no, this is okay. Everything was okay. And I felt very safe and very secure. And so I never felt that need again to kind of be like, whoa, you need to go. And at that point, in truth, I wouldn't have even known how to do that, right? Like, so, but yeah, I remember when I was young the first time and I saw him and I was kind of like, oh, okay. But then I felt safe. And obviously over the years, we've grown closer and we're more connected now, but yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah. I just remember the fun stuff, when I was little, like when I was already like used to them and interacting. But yeah. Okay. Question number 2. Can you offer any advice to those that are new to the craft and are seeking out a coven? Is there anything that you advise that we watch out for, red flags or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's very important to well, I guess it depends on what kind of coven or that you're looking at, but to get a vouch of some kind, to get a verification that these people are who they say they are. I think it's also very important. There's definitely some, if people are trying to kind of force you into things or being heavily suggestive of things that you're not very comfortable with, and it's more of their stance versus an open dialogue, I definitely would say that that's a flag. I was really lucky because when I first started, I did not have any of those major red flags that came up. I remember when we first officially met, it was actually at the pagan brunch that was happening in the West End here.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I remember, some of the other comfort members had shown up, and then when you showed up and you sat down, I remember I had been super anxious because I'm just an anxious person in general, in truth. But I remember when you showed up and arrived, and then everything just felt so much calmer and so much more collected. And the dialogue we always had was always very open and honest. And, whenever you would position things, it was like, this is where I'm coming from, and this is where we go. What are your thoughts and what's going on? And I think that I would suggest definitely trying to find that kind of thing. It's not always going to be right off the bat. You're not always going to find that perfect fit. And I think it's important to recognize that and to acknowledge that that's okay. And, and I would also say maybe it's really important to, as much as it's important for the coven to kind of question you and to be like, hey, so what's your path and where are you coming from? And, what books have you read, and trying to get a feel for you. It's also really important for you to feel that you can do that as well, because it has to be a good fit on both sides. And I think that if you're not feeling that, if you feel like you can't come to these people, whoever they are at the time, and, bring your concerns, your ideas, or even the things that have happened to you in the past that bring up concerns, that if you can't do that, then maybe that's not going to be the right fit for you. It's not necessarily meaning that coven is a bad coven or anything like that. It just, some people just don't fit into certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you're searching for a coven, the most important thing, we can be, I know for me, I was really like, well, me, I get really like, yeah, I want to know all the things and tell me all the stuff and I can do this, blah, 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 and all that. But when you actually, when it comes down to it, the most important thing I think is you're looking for a family in a way. I find anyway, I believe. Because you're going to spend a lot of time with these people, and you want to be able to open up energetically and be willing to learn and all of that as well. But so I think really it's ultimately about trying to find that family feel and trying to be able to be honest and feel that they're also being honest and that as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head.
Advice that you gave, and I completely agree with everything that you said. And it's important to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah.
And if you feel like the person is being put off by your questions, I recommend that you walk away. There's lots of groups out there. And you know what? Even if in your area there are not a lot of groups, it's better to be a solitary than get involved in something that is not a right fit for you. And
100%.
You're joining, yes, for the family aspect, and for some people, and some people are joining because they want to learn witchcraft or they want to learn Wicca, they want to learn different things, and that's great. But it's like you said, you're going to be spending a lot of time together, and never let anyone make you feel like you just have to be quiet and not ask questions, because that's the biggest red flag.
Yeah.
And ask questions, do your research, and if it feels off, it's probably off. And
Yeah.
that's my best advice. I mean, I was fortunate with my coven. I for the most part, a lot of good people came in. There was one that I didn't want to let in, but it ended up happening anyway. I got talked into it, and that ended up being a bomb. But that's, as leaders, we learn too, right? So
stuff, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
we're not perfect. Sure. We're all humans trying to do better.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. I have heard that many high priestesses can become egomaniacs and overly identify with power. Did Maggie Moon ever go through such a phase? Or have either of you experienced this with others?
That's another thing I've been really fortunate in. Obviously working with you, that was never an issue. I've always felt very comfortable in, even if there was something that we never necessarily agreed with, I always felt like I could come to you and be like, okay, well, I hear what you're saying and I understand your side. This is kind of how I'm seeing it. You know, what do you think about that? And there was always that open dialogue. I definitely know that that can be a thing. But I've never, just from my interactions with others, but I've never had that myself. So yeah, no, in our own interactions, it was always pretty, it was very comfortable. And I will say that there is a point, I think, especially within traditional Wicca along the way, where you can, you know, or even just doing any sort of work, really, where you're going to have to face your ego. That's just part of it, I think. And so I think that sometimes people can get caught up in that and they can get stuck. Mm-hmm. And it's important to be able to have compassion and understanding when that happens, because again, we're all human, but you know, also too, that can happen. And so I know it's a definite thing, but I don't know. I always, whenever I talk about my own coven experience, my first coven experience, and well, the only one I've had so far, but I always say that I'm very blessed. I was very blessed because I've read so many times where people join covens that were just not good fits. And, you know, or unfortunately, there are some people out there who do go into that ego thing and it's all about them. And unfortunately, other people suffer because of that. And so I've heard those stories and I've read them and spoken with people about them, but I was so blessed. And I'm really grateful to you for that, actually, Maggie, because coming in, I always felt very comfortable. And even when I had my own ego things that came up, and they did at times, because again, I think that any sort of spiritual work, that should be happening if you're actually doing the work. But even in those moments when that would happen, you know, there was always compassion from you and stuff for that. So I always felt really lucky in that sense, I feel, because not everybody has that. So, you know, it is definitely a thing. Yes, there is. I think I've heard it called like high priestess disease and all these other terms and stuff. But and so it's definitely out there. But again, I think going back kind of to the other question where it was like when you're first approaching your coven and stuff, I think you would probably get a sense for that pretty quickly if you're being open enough and kind of listening to your own intuition. And so if you're getting that, you know, definitely I would say stay clear, only because, especially as a seeker initially, it's really important for leaders to be supportive and to be understanding. And, you know, because especially when you're first starting out, like there's so many things and it's overwhelming, and especially if you're first time doing energy work and stuff like that, like it's so important to have people that you can trust in and who will be honest and in themselves as well, face themselves first. And in their own stuff before going outward. So yeah, I was just really lucky. I'm pretty blessed. So I'm grateful to you for that. And I'm thankful to, you know, the powers that be, that's kind of how it unfolded for me personally. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm actually happy and relieved to hear that, because when I saw the question, I was like, I don't know. Like, I hope not. Like, I know I tried not to ever make it about me, but I'm like, you never know, because like you said, we're all growing, we're all facing our things. Same with you. When I mean, it was such a beautiful journey to watch you grow and blossom as much as you did. Like, you came to me as a seeker and ended up being my co-leader. We led together. And that was amazing, and it was awesome. And you were always very approachable as well. Like, if you didn't agree with something, I'm so happy that you always felt like you could come forth and say, okay, this is how I see it. And we had that rapport and that respect for each other. So it was great. I didn't always have that. And things can happen that are really, really wild sometimes when you are leading a coven. You have to make decisions. And when you get into that leadership role, you have to think about the other people in the group. It's not just your journey anymore. You are helping people upon their path. You do your stuff quietly and assist your group. Was it hard to lead a coven together? Did you ever disagree? If you did, how did you handle
it? Was it hard to lead a coven together? No. I, again, was very blessed. I think that You were always really approachable, and I think whenever we had to make decisions for, you know, the seekers or initiates that we had, it was always very, you know, open dialogue, and we're both people as well who are very sensitive to the needs of other people, and so I think that that was always a priority for us in terms of, you know, making sure that our initiates and seekers were looked after, but also not coddling them or anything like that, because that's not really our style.
Yes.
And nor should it be. I think any good leader, you shouldn't be doing that, because sometimes things will be tough along the path and that. But so was it tough to lead? No. And in terms of disagreements, yes, of course, we definitely had moments where we had disagreements and things we didn't necessarily agree on, and you know, we were coming from different places on. But I think that even in moments where, me more so probably, because Aries Sun, Leo rising, I can be very fiery at times, and even at times when I would be really like, okay, well, I feel very passionately about this, and I think we, you know, you always knew, you know, our interaction and just in our own relationship and friendship and family relationship was very like, okay, well, we could read each other well, I think, in the sense of, okay, now this time that, okay, we're gonna, like, we presented it now, and even in those moments, if it got heated, it was very like, okay, let's take some time and let's think about this and come back to it. And so, which is how it should be done, right? Like, we're all human. And, you know, I know some people can let the leadership and the ego to go to their head, and I've definitely had moments like that too, in truth. Yeah, but it's about growth, and I think it's about recognizing, you know, that each other are humans, and we're just trying to do the best, right? And just like any other job, really, you're trying to do your best all the time, and you're going to have moments where it's not, you know, things you don't necessarily agree on things, but okay, let's take some time and reflect and grow and come back and revisit this. And so I think that was kind of always, I don't know about you, but that's kind of how I found it, at least on my end of things. So it was, yeah,
me too. Like, even when we didn't agree, we agreed more than people in other situations would approach. So upset with you that I had to go cool off for days or anything like that, or we didn't have disagreements like that, like just in the moment where, okay, let me just think for a minute. The question, Herne, are you still Wiccan? And if so, how do you feel about Maggie Moon's path now?
So I'm going to start to answer that backwards. How do I feel about your path now? I absolutely love it. I think that having worked with you within Wicca, and you're such an amazing high priestess and really great, and you know, all of that, seeing you, I think that when you, especially having been in a high priest role, you're, one of the blessings I think of that is being able to see people flourish and grow over time. And I think that, you know, that kind of, I can see where you've come from, and knowing you as a person, and knowing you as energetically as that as well, and what your drive is and passions are. I think that this is so much more suited to you as a being, and I'm so happy to see you on this path now, because I think that you've definitely found your thing, and it shows, and it's amazing to watch, and I'm so proud of you and so happy. I love you so much.
I love you too.
What was the first part of that question again, though? Because I answered the second part. The first part was about.
You too.
No, you start, because then I'm going to start.
I know. Thank you. Are you still Wiccan? Was the first part.
Yes. Once you're Wiccan, once you're initiate, and that you're always kind of Wiccan. Do I still practice in a coven? I am not currently practicing in a coven. In truth, my focus has been very much on personal healing work over the last little while, especially during this pandemic. It's brought up so many things when you're kind of forced to be alone, and or, you know, or only with like your partner or whoever you live with, and you can't really go out into the world. It really brings up a lot of shadow stuff. And in truth, I thought I had done shadow work before, but I'm doing a lot more of that now. And so my focus has been really on that versus being a part of, or even starting my own coven. Is that something that's never going to happen? I don't know. I'm of the belief that I never say never these days. And I do have a drive, and you will know this from having, you know, worked together in the coven kind of atmosphere. I do love to teach, and I do love to guide and help people. So Is that something that'll happen eventually? Yes. Do I see myself as Wiccan now? Yes, and always. And I will probably always work with the Wiccan gods and work with, you know, those kind of energies and stuff, just in my own practice even. Even when I'm trying other things, to incorporate other things, which I am of the belief that is completely okay. It's important to try different stuff. That's how we find ourselves. Even when I'm doing that, I still have a lot of that structure. One thing that I remember, it was quite a few years ago, I was at the Witches Sabbath when it was still going on at the Knoll. And I remember my first Sabbath, and I was there, and I was one of the only Wiccan initiates there. So a lot of people were coming from a very tradcraft kind of place, which while there's a lot of similarities, can be very different. And so I remember feeling very like, whoa, you know, this is really different. But one of the things that I'm really grateful for with Wicca is that it gave me such a firm foundation. It gave me a firm foundation to work from, so that now at this point on my path, when I am doing my own healing work and I am doing my own rituals and I am doing my own shadow work, I have that foundation to work from. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that that's one of the blessings of working within an established tradition that is carried on, is that you do get those roots. So that now, you know, my own tree can kind of branch out into these other areas and do these things, but I will always have those roots to draw on. And even in my day-to-day life, you know, when things come up, there's still things that you had taught me, you know, and that I will draw on and I work with, and to help me through those situations. So yeah, I definitely identify still as a Wiccan, but no, I'm not working within a coven format or anything right now, but one day, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and if you ever do, they will be lucky to have you, because you did
You're
take
so
on a
kind.
teaching role in the coven.
I love
You
that.
did an amazing job. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
So
You're kind.
anybody watching, if he ever does start a coven, I recommend him completely, and you will do so well under his care.
Well, thank you. You're so kind.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
You appreciate that. Witches and wine, you open up, you know? Which is great.
What it's all about, man.
All
Witches and
about.
wine. Yeah. Herne, can you
Yeah.
paint us a picture of what Maggie Moon was like back then in the day?
Okay. I always remember you as being really passionate. You're a very passionate person, very strong, I would say, but the kind of true strength that has like, can show compassion and cry with you and be there. And so like, and I'm not just like paying lip service or something because we're doing the show, like, you know, like I've always said this, like I'm pretty blunt actually, sometimes to a fault. And it's sometimes got me in trouble, but I've always remembered you as somebody who's really strong and just really supportive. And you know, everybody has their days and their things, but even when you were having those days, you were always wise enough to know, like, I should not put this on other people. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I shouldn't be like, which I could actually take some lessons from, and I have at times, because I can sometimes be like, this is what's going on in my life, and initially at least. But I always found you to be very strong and really supportive. And one of the biggest memories that I have, one was in Circle, so I won't go into that, but one was, although there was lots of Circle memories, but one memory I have is going back again to that first time that I came in to the Pagan Brunch in the West End to meet you and to meet some of the other Coven members. And I remember I met them and had been chatting and stuff, but I remember when you came in and you sat down right beside me. And I remember instantly having this feeling of like, okay, this person has definitely led some stuff and they know some things. You just had that vibe of like knowledge, you know, like that innate inner stuff. But then there was also this such a like human, like such a calming vibe of like, I'm going to be able to relate to this person. And as we got to know each other, we did, you know, and it was nice and it was reassuring. And so I feel like, I don't know, I don't think I could ever speak poorly about you, in truth. Like, I don't think there was ever, because even in those moments where if you ever had something going on, you just did it with such class and such, I don't know, and I respected that. I've always respected that, truthfully, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's actually really nice to hear. Ourselves sometimes feel like we're struggling and that we're not as strong as we could be, but then other people, because, you know, I do see you as being very strong as well. And when I'm going through some stuff, like, I always went to you. Like we always had
Yeah.
that rapport and
Yeah.
that support for each other. Um, and yeah, it was just, you were my rock when I needed a rock as well. So,
Mm.
you know, the same applies to you.
Oh, that's
I've
cool.
always seen you as a pillar of strength, you know, but, you know, able to admit when stuff isn't going
Mm.
exactly as you would like it to be going right now, but you're
Yeah.
going through stuff and you're doing your best. And I've always admired that about you.
Thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. What are your thoughts on circle casting?
Like, is there more detail on that? Like, just in general?
Just
Like,
that.
what are my thoughts on circle casting? I think that when you're going to be doing, this is a good question. I might need a second to think about this one because I feel like I have great memories in terms of being in circle and in that environment and the energies that instantly creates as soon as you define that boundary. So I definitely, I think that it's important to do in terms of defining a space for so many different reasons. I think it's important energetically, just in terms of things that you might not necessarily want to invite in to, depending on whatever you're doing. But I think it's also important in terms of learning how to move energy and learning. I remember when I was first starting out, and I remember when I was first trying to do the circle, and I had so many questions, and I was emailing you, and I remember being uncertain about, is it there? For example, I was like, is this actually happening? And I think that it can be important to learn how to do in the sense of over time and over practice regularly. I started to realize my own power and my own ability to create spaces between spaces and to define that working area and just to know what I was capable of. And so I think it's really important in that sense. Do I think that you need to do a circle every single time you're going to do a magical working? No, not necessarily. Do I think that it will help you when you're magical working? I definitely think that it can be an amazing tool as something that can kind of hold that energy until you're ready to and release it based on what you're working on. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how I feel about it. I think that, you know, in summation, it's a great skill to learn because it'll teach you a lot about your ability and it'll confirm a lot about your ability for yourself. It's a great skill to learn because when you are in situations where you need that boundary for whatever reason, it's good to know it and to have it. You know, how it should be done, I was taught, you know, obviously one way within a tradition, but I've also tried other ways. And I think that should it always be done and can only be done in one way? No, I don't believe that personally. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what comes to me now. That's kind of what I would say about it right now. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you kind of think? I'm curious to see, because you mentioned that we could differ on this, and I do like when we do differ because it stimulates great conversation. So,
well, actually, you touched on some points that I definitely agree with, like most of them.
yeah.
Over time and over experience, I've learned, because in Wicca, and I'm not talking about trad Wicca or whatever, just Wicca in general,
Yeah.
we're taught that the circle is like the boundary that protects us and this and that. And I've learned over time that's not necessarily the case. And but everything else you touched on, I agree. Like, it's a good place to get to know your own energy, get to know yourself, develop your skills, and it's good to have. I think I've always compared it to, you need a pot to boil water. So if you're casting this, you want to raise energy and direct it somewhere, you want to, you know, define that. And I totally agree with that. Over time, I have learned that those circles are not necessarily as protective as we think. And I think the power lies in our belief in the fact that we are protected, of course, but it's not necessarily the actual circle. And, you know, that's just the way I've experienced things. And I think you'll remember, used to say, like, people are bringing stuff into the circle. Like, I would have to like do clearings after coven meetings, like to clear out the energy and things like that. And it was something that really like perplexed me. Is it that people are bringing it into the circle? But how can that be if we're like doing all the steps and doing the work? When we do the layers, I'm not going to get into any oathbound anything, but do the layers to get there, to the space, to each other, you know, to cleanse and whatever, get us there. And yet things are still there. What's up with that? And so that's when I first started questioning things. And then as I practiced over and over again, over many years, I don't feel that it's necessarily the circle that protects us. It is something that will help us contain the energy that we raise and things like that, but it's not really that type of barrier that we were taught. And that's just my opinion. People can believe what, you know me.
Yep.
I just say things from my experience, and people, and you don't have to agree with me to be my friend. And I've always been clear about that, or for me to respect you. And I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm talking about anybody who's watching as well. You know what I mean? Like, I am very easy-going that way. If it works for you, that's awesome. You do what works for you. I do what works for me, and whatever. We're just sharing to grow, not to compete or say anything's one way. Because if anything, we know there's not just one way to do anything.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Is I agree with you on that. I feel like ultimately it comes down to oneself, and I do believe, I mean, I know from experience that belief is a huge thing. And so I think, you know, I think ultimately it's always about what is your truth, you know, trying to find your truth first, and then, you know, living up to that and trying to abide by that. So whatever your path is that you're walking, whatever it is that you find ultimately works for you, that's what works for you. And that's totally cool. And I think that that's, you know, important to be able to acknowledge, because there can be a lot of debate, there's, you know, out there in general, and people do, you know, sometimes can come from places of like, well, this is always like this and da 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 da.
Exactly.
But why is it always like that? Like, maybe that's for you, that works great, that's awesome, but that's not everybody's way. And I think one of the beautiful things about the human race is we're all unique. You know, we're all these unique beings, and so what works for you, and it's great when covens come together and people can find similar practices and do all of that because they're in line and it works, and those work for them at that point in time. But ultimately, it's your own path. One of the things that I say all the time is that except for the blessed few, we are born and we leave this world alone. So it's really your own path to walk, and so ultimately, it's, you know, what works for you on your path. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that would be my only advice, like, because it was really an open question. What are your thoughts on circle casting? So I'm not really sure what the underlining
intention was,
question behind that. It was just very general. And I mean, circles are great when you want to like undo the day-to-day, when you come into a space just from work, let's say, and you take those layers to cast that circle. I believe that those steps are for us. The spirits already know we're calling them. They're already there. It's just so that we can be able to perceive them and things like that. And so the circle is excellent for that. And it's excellent to declare your dominion upon this space. Like, I am God of this circle, and I'm going to manifest my will and direct it to where I want to create change into the multiverse. And all of that is very important. But from a protective stance, I think the power and all of that comes from the individual's knowledge and their strength and them being prepared for the working. So don't ever call something forth if you're afraid of it and you want to just boss it around and you think your little circle is going to protect you. I don't think that's really going to go well. And most of the spirit, don't call anything forth that you think you have to hide from. First of all, it's rude.
And it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. They're going to think the spirits are going to think you're a joke, first of all, like for cowering behind. And I know people are going to disagree. And that's just like, it doesn't work like that. It would be like me asking you to come over and teach me or grant me my desire, but you stay over there in that circle. And we're going to talk from here, even though I called you all this way, and the spirit is not going to appreciate that, in my opinion. So don't call forth anything that you're afraid of. Always be prepared, obviously. What was your favorite part of coven life, and what was your least favorite part of coven life?
My favorite part of coven life was the sense of family, I think, especially initially as a seeker, because I know for me personally, and I know of other people that I've spoken with, and that when you're first seeking, when you're first stepping out on a new path, there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much self-doubt, and there's so much so many things that you're unsure of initially, and because you don't know yet. And I feel like for me, again, I was super lucky and very blessed, and I'm very grateful for that. But it was nice to have that sense of family, to have that sense of I could, if whatever was going on in the world and whatever was going on in my life, being able to come and be in circle, and before circle, having that chit chat, and that hey, this is what's going on with me, and that connection and that building, and to be able to do that, and then to go into a space and to create this space with these other people who had similar intentions and similar motivations, and we're on the similar greater work, and to be able to define that space, and just to be able to just be. There were some times in circles I did talk a lot, because again, I like to teach, and I like to share, and I like to learn, and but there were so many times I can remember where I just being there, just being in the moment, or there being just being able to exist in that kind of support and that kind of vibe. And so I think that would be the best thing. I think that that's a really big thing for me personally. I don't like the word worst thing. I think I don't know. I feel
least favorite
thing. I'm somebody who can be really organized, and really okay, this is what's going on. And I think sometimes for me, it can be really, and I learned a lot actually having become a high priest. I think my perception on timing and scheduling and getting people together and stuff as an initiate, initially in a seeker, was very different from where once I actually got into a high priest role, and I was able to facilitate more, because you get to see more, right? You get to see how much more oh shoot, now I'm bringing all these lives together. I'm trying to make it all work. Now, so I think sometimes for me, initially that was, oh, when are we going to meet, and what's going to happen, and that kind of stuff. The day-to-day, just like any other thing that you're trying to schedule and get people together, could be a thing. But I don't even say it was necessarily least favorite, because it always worked out in the end. And one of the things I learned later on is, even if it didn't work out, there was a reason why it did not work out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because as much as we like to believe as people on this planet that we are in control of all the things, we are not necessarily in control of all the things. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's probably how I would answer that. I don't know. I'm curious to know your answer. What do you think? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, my favorite part definitely was that support that we had, and just people to bounce things off of, like this happened and that happened, and just getting that feedback and having that connection on such a level. Like, our coven was pretty close. It was a family for real, and we had all those people that we could call at any second, any hour of the night, if we needed to. And just having that was really beautiful. But from a magical perspective as well, when we got together in circle, like every single person that ended up in the coven, everybody that was there was, in my opinion, was meant to be there, and it just clicked. And it was amazing to experience that in a group. The best coven experience that I ever had. And I've been in some in Montreal, and then in Ottawa, and then here and there. Like, I had a few different experiences, and that really was like the best one. My least favorite parts were, this is just me, because I can't be put in a box, I get restless, and having to stick to certain things. The whole pecking order of things, I found sometimes when you're talking about lineages and stuff like that, wasn't that important to me. Titles or lineages and stuff like that. So I think that was me. I was the problem in that area, because it wasn't important to me, and I'm in an area where it's important. I guess that would be my least favorite aspect. And like you said, the scheduling and stuff, when you came into the picture and I got to give that to you, I was like,
Oh,
yeah.
you probably I could see why now, like, and yeah, having been through that, I can certainly understand that. It's but it's because you're trying to consider everybody. And I think that too, again, going back to what I said before about we're both really, one of the priorities for us is trying to make sure that those we care about are looked after and taken care of, and especially in that kind of role. And so you're trying to, you know, accommodate and do all this stuff. And but ultimately it was all it's all learning. Everything is all a learning experience, right? So as long as we approach it from that place, then you can never go wrong, I think, ultimately. And it's still like one of the best experiences I've ever had. I mean, it's the only one in terms of a coven as of now, but it's the best, you know, one of the best experiences just overall in this life for me has been, yeah, I was so blessed. I was so blessed. I see now, looking back, why it happened when it did instead of when I originally wanted it to happen. It was like, it was not ready, you know, it was not time yet. So when it was time, and it was awesome. So yeah.
Awesome.
We were so great, Maggie.
We were, though. We
We're
really
so cool.
were. We were. We were the coolest. I don't know. It's just, that's something really hard to live up to. Like if I was ever, I've had people ask me like, can you do it again? Can you? And I'm a little afraid because I don't know if I could match that. Like we were blessed. We were very lucky to.
You know, you brought it up first. So I thought about it before, but I'm going to say it now because you brought it up first. I think one of the reasons why I hesitate actually to, you know, kind of start that and facilitate potentially a coven and that again, is because I had such an amazing experience initially. And as much as I know now that my current high priestess and that would be there and be supportive and is amazing as well in and of herself.
Yes,
like
yes, of course.
Spoken with her and you know her, and as much as I would have that support and it would be great, I just it's that like, oh, but this was so great. Like, do I ever want to touch that again? Do you know what I mean? I'm still at that point of like, oh, I would never, you know, I don't know. And so yeah. But again, who knows in time? We'll see.
Yeah, when the time is right, it may just all unfold, right?
Yeah.
Never say never, and you never know. But at least you have something healthy and good to begin from, to grow from.
That's for sure.
And
good roots.
That's awesome. Good roots. Yeah. And then you have extra firm roots because you've since branched out your roots with someone that is amazing as well. So it's all good. So whatever you do produce, I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And I hope to get invited every once in a while to just.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Say hey. Sure. Yeah. All right. So I guess this question would be perfect. Some covens closed down on a bad note. What was it like when Maggie Moon left? So there's a few little layers to this, so I'll just leave it there, and we'll go from there.
So I have two responses. One is my initial response, and one is my upon reflection years later response.
Okay.
My initial response, I was really sad. I think I was really hurt because I felt like, again, it was such an amazing thing, and I didn't want to let that go. And so I think that that's where that came from. It wasn't necessarily from anything you had done or anybody else had done or anything, you know, or it was just from that. It was very much a me thing of, you know, wanting to keep that in my life. So that was kind of my initial thing. I felt kind of hurt and upset. But then also too, even at that point, and definitely much, you know, quite a while later when I had time to really look at it and absorb everything, it was time. I feel like it was really time. I feel like it was a wise decision in the end because I think that when you're in a leadership role of any kind, you can't always think of your team or your coven, you know, you can't always think of the people that you're working with in that sense of like, I have to do everything for them and make them happy. And what I think you have to be able to live your truth. And because through doing that, you actually inspire and you show people that they can live their truth. And while I didn't understand that necessarily in the moment, I definitely understand that now. And I feel like, I think that it was definitely time. I think that it was also definitely time, because there were things that unfolded, you know, in your life and my life after that, that had we still had that, it would have been great. We would have had the support in that. But I think it would have almost potentially could have damaged or tainted that, in a sense of like, you know, I don't know how to say it more than that. Like, it could have, we needed to not have that coven anymore when we went through these other things, both yourself and myself after, because we needed to, do you know what I mean? Am I
Yeah.
making
Oh,
sense?
I do, from like
Sometimes
my
once I'm in the cup, I
perspective.
blow on the love button. So
Part
sometimes once I'm in the cup, I'm like, you know me, I'm like, blah, blah, blah.
Oh
So,
yeah, we
no,
start
but
channeling the wine, folks.
channeling the wine.
That was a common expression when
Yes,
we're like, okay, we're just channeling the wine now. It's,
yes,
you know, but we still kept going. Like,
yes. So true. No, but do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it was time. And at the time I was hurt. And in truth, now looking back, and I can say to you, because I love you and I know you love me, and we're always honest with each other. But at the time I was really angered and I was upset. But looking at it now and seeing it now, I think that you made the right call was made. I don't want to say you, because we, again, our structure was always talk about everything, but like,
yeah,
ultimately it was your decision. And I feel like it was the right decision, because we were all kind of starting to have our other paths unfold before us.
yeah,
And I don't think that necessarily we all recognized that as much as you did. I think that you saw that, and it was the right leadership role to make, in the sense of, okay, so now let's preserve this. Let's keep this beautiful thing that we built as it was. And now let's let everybody kind of go where they're supposed to, where they're going anyway now. And,
yeah.
you know, I think that ultimately it was the right decision in the end. Yeah.
Thank
Sure.
you. It wasn't an easy decision, of course,
I'm
but
sure.
it
Yeah.
was something I really felt within every cell of my body that it was time to do. And I've always been honest about that. When I go against
Yeah.
that feeling, it's never good for anyone. So I had to go with it, and we still stayed, like, we still communicate with each other, some of us. Not everybody was thrilled about it, and but it had to be done. And yeah.
I didn't initially, but I support you 100% in that now. I think it was the right call for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
No
Yeah, it
problem.
was a hard one, especially because I knew you're like, what are you doing?
Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, even though it closed down for me, I was always observing there still
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I know the rumor mills can be high between covens. Have you experienced this? What was the most ridiculous thing you ever heard about yourselves that was untrue?
You know, in truth, that was untrue. The most ridiculous we heard about ourselves. About like ourselves personally, or like our coven kind of thing. I guess either.
Either or, I'd say, right?
I never really heard anything back. I don't know. There's nothing that's really coming to me off the top of my head. I feel like, but I also wonder, like, I would be positive that a good part of that is because even if there were things coming back, probably wasn't at the time, at least in the beginning. When I was high priest with you, when we were working together, in that sense, I think by that point, like, I didn't really hear anything. There wasn't really much or anything coming back. And before I would have been high priest, you know, and even just as an initiate, like I said before, you know, you would present things to us and talk to us. But just knowing you personally, I know that you would never be like, so this person said this and blah, 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 and do, because that's just not your style, right? So even if that was going on, that was not really something that I would have been really privy to. And by the time we were working together, our focus was like, we're working together, and what do we want to do, and what do we want to bring, and I have this idea and you have this, you know, like, it was more focused on that. It was about the coven itself and running that, and whatever's going on externally is what's going on externally. And I think too, one of the things that I love about Wicca is that each coven is autonomous unto itself. So regardless, there isn't that thing of like, I mean, yes, there can be that thing of people saying and talking and doing whatever. It does happen. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because it would have been about, how do we want to run the coven? What do we want to do? We got to stick true to the core, but what do we want to add to that? What do we want to build on it? What do we want to, you know, what's coming to each of us individually from the gods we're working with? Like, what do we want to do? And those kinds of things. And I think that, yeah, I guess again, it just comes down to that, like, we had such a great group. And so I didn't really get that myself. I think I would defer to you in that sense. I don't know if there were other things that you maybe heard of, but myself, that wasn't really a big concern or something that I really was aware of, really.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'm so happy that that was your experience. That
Yeah.
makes me, that was my goal with our group, and then our almost like our descendants from there is to be about the work, be about the development, and
Yes.
not be about the outside noise. um there, I did experience some of the outside noise, but I never gave it much stock, to
Mm.
be honest.
Mm.
I like to do my own thing and make my own decisions. And but I guess one of the most ridiculous things that I heard was, well, yeah, I heard that you and so, so me and so, the former high priest before, well, no, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're on a street in Toronto, which I don't think I've ever been to Toronto. Like I've driven through it or whatever, but I've never like, um, we're yelling at each other back and forth from across the street, like swearing at each other and arguing. That never happened because A, I was never there, and I'm
Wow.
not sure. And this was other leaders, like high ranking people that heard, like, so the rumor went, that far. Other little things that popped up over time since then that I've heard that I don't even allow it to fully register in my brain because it's that unimportant to me. Just like, oh, that's just more of that. That's just not where I want to resonate. And if people do, they can say whatever they want. The people that know us and know me and whatever will speak to that truth. And those who don't, it'll be evident by whatever they are speaking. And I could just leave it at that. I can honestly say I don't care.
That's never been
Like,
your style, yeah, to like
yeah.
give energy to that kind of thing anyway. So I'm not surprised by
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree with that. I tend to be the same way. Because the thing is too is you see different sides of people anyway, right? Like one person might be one way with you and then completely different with somebody else based on that dynamic and relationship. So how can you truly
Absolutely.
really, fault or judge anybody else based on, however they are in another environment that you're not even privy to? Like, what does that have anything to do with you to begin with? And
Yeah.
really, that was a different experience. Let them have that. And anyway.
Yeah, that's just one of those things where it's like, are you in my head? That's why we got along so well, because that's exactly how I feel. Like different people bring out different things in each other. So you can't really go by that.
Were there yours to that one?
There
Or?
are, there are.
Okay.
Oh, have you ever encountered bitter gossip? Gossip hounds in leading roles. Can you share an example?
Uh-huh. Um, I think that have there been? Yes. Was it something that I was directly privy to? No. So do I really have a right to judge or comment on? Probably not. What I will say is that I think that we're all human and we all go through things and things happen, and I understand that. And even when I'm angry and I'm upset in a moment, I try to have understanding of that, because that's part of the human experience, is to fall and to scrape ourselves and to get back up and to keep going. But I think that also too, I feel like people who, want to get caught up in talk or in things or, that kind of energy, whenever I see that unfolding with people, it tells me a lot. It tells me, first of all, it's probably not somebody that I want to get involved with, because that's not in line with my own direction and my own path. Going back to what I was saying before, we're all brought in and we all go out alone with the exception of a blessed few. And so I feel like ultimately that's not in line with who I am or why I'm here, or my own greater work and my own evolution. And so I don't really like to give energy to that. So even just really commenting or speaking much on, any of the little things that I have known, that's not really my style, to be like, oh, well, blah, 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 and this and that happened. And like, I don't want to dwell on those things, especially now. Like the year has taught me so much about how, we all have moments where we'll screw up. And we all have moments where we'll falter, and we all have those shadow aspects of ourselves. Sometimes they come out and they're not pretty and they're not fun, but they happen. And my approach to that is more of a, okay, I see what's happening with you. I kind of understand what's going on. I can't understand everything because I'm not part of it, but I can see that you're having a struggle. And, you know, unless I'm feeling either pushed or drawn to participate and be there and try to help and heal, because that's the thing in my life. Unless I'm feeling that, I generally will be like, okay, most of the time when these struggles happen, you're supposed to go it alone. So it's not really my place to jump in and be there and do all that. So in general.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just don't like to get involved with that kind of stuff. And I prefer to not give it power by giving words to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that would be my answer to that. Yeah, that's kind of my stance on that. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a very healthy stance that you have, and it's much in alignment with my personal stance. And to be honest, when I see people like with the gossip hound kind of role, there's the person who conveys information because it's necessary, even if it's unpleasant, because it's from a caring stance. But the gossip hound stance, to me, I don't even really see or hear what the person is saying about the other person. It's telling me the story of the individual before me. So that's how I approach that. And from that, I do decide quickly whether or not I want to give that any more of my time. Like you said, it's a process, whether or not you are drawn or pushed back. I guess it would be the same for me. Nowadays, I'm more often than not pushed away because I just
it doesn't align.
Time for that. It doesn't align. And nowadays, not that I don't care about other people, because there are some people, like I have worked through my own stuff, and I am truly at a place where I give love, compassion, support to those that I love and feel are deserving. And I give hatred and disdain and nothingness to those that are just deserving. And so it's no longer that battle in myself, like, oh, that little voice, well, you should, even though you don't want to, and you shouldn't anyway. That's gone. I'm in, I just listen to that inner voice.
Yeah. What a great place to be at, actually. That's hats off to you with that, because that, for me personally, like it can still be a struggle at times. Like ultimately I come to that place of, okay, no, I don't want that in my life, but yeah.
But then you kind of go there anyway a little bit because of that voice, right?
Yeah, and also because I've lived I've walked so many different paths already in my short 39 years in this life, and so because of that, I often have a sense of, oh, I get it, or I see what's happening because I've been there and I've done it, or I've been in an environment where I saw it happening right beside me, or whatever, right? And so that can sometimes make me like feel guilty or feel bad in the moment. I'm still kind of in that place personally, but ultimately I always come to a place of, I think 2020 has taught me a lot about boundaries, about being able to be like, no, that does not serve me. It might serve you right now and you need to go through that, and I wish you well on your path, but it does not serve me and it will not help me. So yeah, that's probably where I'm coming from that place now, but it's my own headspace. And
well, no, everybody's where they're at, and that's good. I support that. And I'm just 100%. I don't have that guilt. I just, and that's just where I'm at. And it's not that I don't care that I'm cold or whatever. If it's not from a cold place at all. It's from, Have you ever felt used by fake people just so that they can get their degrees?
That's a good question. I feel like, well, consciously, I'm not bringing anything forward or any distinct moments right now. There's something inside me that is very much like, yes, there was something unfolding and something that was happening, and you were part of that. So there's a truth to that. I want to say that yes, the short answer would be yes. But I don't know, I feel like it clearly wasn't so much of a presence that it's like in the forefront of my mind as soon as I'm posed with that question. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel, does that make sense? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And I feel like, yeah, I think that's pretty much all that's coming to me as an answer for that one. Truth, like, I don't really. Yeah. What about you? How do you've also been, I mean, you in this life, you've been on a spiritual path much longer than I have anyway, and so you've probably come across more things. How did, either in our own coven that we had or just in general, like, have you had that kind of okay, I figured maybe.
Yeah.
But like,
yes, I've had.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had the fakies coming in and trying to pretend that they had lineages or degrees from different places, and oh, I'll get that for you. Just like bring me into your coven and the razzle dazzle whole thing. And of course, we have to, you know, in that particular line, it doesn't work like that. It's not going to happen like that. We have to verify. And fakes were exposed, and many were never even to the point where they were brought forth to discuss with the coven because they were not even worthy of that discussion. You know, they were just the fakes, which always confused me. Why pretend to be what you're not when all you have to do is just earn it like everybody else? What's the big deal?
There's actually, now that you've said your part, I actually do have some things that are coming to me as well, because there was a point in time where I did a lot of the initial interactions between other people trying to come in and try to approach the coven, just in you know, one of the roles that I kind of held. And so there were definitely moments like that where I would reach out, and there were some that even like, in that sense of like, oh, well, this is who I am, and I'm this person, and I've done this, and well, where I didn't even feel that to the coven, because it was like, well, no, this doesn't feel right. It didn't ken well, you know what I mean? And and then there were also other times where, you know, people would reach and they would, you know, it was kind of even the opposite, where people would come in and be like, I don't really know as much, and I don't, and then we would like meet and they would do and you'd be like, wow, like there's one person. And, you know, one female that comes to mind in particular who came in and had a lot of anxiety and stuff. But when they came in and when they did it, I was like, okay, there's the thing. There's you know, so it happened on both sides. But and I would say, in terms of just my interactions, coven aside, just as a general person in Wiccan circles, I would say that, I probably externally seen that, you know, people preaching this and saying that. It's unfortunately, and it's unfortunate because I definitely find, I've never been on the other side of the pond, as we like to say, but I definitely feel my current high priestess is from the UK, which is where Wicca originally comes from, as you know, and it's very different there from my understanding than it is here. There is a lot of ego and a lot of boasting and a lot of speaking from a place of, I'm not saying everybody, I'm not saying that that's everybody, but there is much more of that I found than my interactions with people, you know, on the other side. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen there, and we're all human again, but there's something about here, and I think it has a lot to do with people's need to feel validated and need to feel seen, and that they're important, which is a basic human need. Like, we all need that love and attention, right? It's a thing. But I feel like it comes from that place of like, oh, well, I'm this. And especially some people, you know, I think can feel when they're walking into unknown circles the first time of, if I come in with all of this that I've created behind me, then I don't know why I suddenly felt the need to talk like this while doing that. But if I come in with this, all this stuff, then I will be taken seriously and I will not be seen for what I actually am. Yeah, and as somebody who struggles with his own sense of self-worth and stuff at times, I can recognize that and I can see that. And so I think that definitely happens. And so in that sense, I have interacted in that sense. And my approach is usually to see them for what they are. And I think, especially after this year, I can admit now that I used to judge a lot initially. I used to say that I didn't, but I used to judge a lot initially. And through my own healing work, I've come to recognize that that's because it was a protective thing. It was I need to know who you are because I've been hurt from, you know, such a young age. I need to know and assess who you are quickly. And so now I've learned kind of over the last several months, and I'm starting to absorb the wisdom of, again, we're all human. And so even when people are coming from that place, I think it's so important we can get our guard up, and especially those, you know, who are in mystery traditions and stuff, and you can get guarded because you want to protect your oaths, and you want to protect the knowledge, and you want to protect the wisdom, so you don't want to just give that to anybody. And I mean, we have processes in place like vouching and all of that as well to be able to validate somebody before sharing things anyway. But I feel like, you know, ultimately it's we have to look at each other with compassionate eyes. And we have to look at each other with, even if, you know, like you were saying before, like that's not a part of my path and I'm not acknowledging that and that's not my life and I see you. And even if you're coming from that place, I think it's so important for us to still look on each other with compassionate eyes and try to understand that we're all human and we're all just trying to make the best of it. And life is a struggle. Life will never be peachy keen. It's never going to be super chill. It's never going to be like, everything is aligned and perfect now, and so now I am okay for the rest of my years. No, that's not going to happen. It's not realistic. It's going to be a struggle. But in general, it is not my place to judge other people and to see, you know, ultimately, if you want to walk down that path, I know enough to know that you can readily take on whatever you will reap from that.
Yeah.
And that's your choice. So,
and sometimes that's the best thing you can do for someone, really.
Yeah.
Is let them walk their path to experience what comes of that. Because as we know, I've often said it's through the struggle that we often transform.
Mm-hmm.
And through personal experience, I can attest that is really true.
Struggle shapes you for sure. Yes.
I feel Maggie was a real gift to her students and to Wicca. Well, thank you. I appreciate all of your comments, and from your comments we know each other and we've been in circle together, so thank you. I miss her as a high priestess. Herne, do you miss it? And then Maggie Moon, do you miss working as a high priestess and working with Herne?
I definitely have. Well, even earlier, you know, just saying what I was telling you, and when we were just texting and stuff, getting ready for this, I lit some Nag Champa because that was something that we used to have, and it's I definitely miss the circles. I definitely miss you know, being able to have the vibe that we had in those moments, and I'm of the big belief that things that happen in circle stay in circle, and so I don't go too much into that whenever I speak about it in general, but because each circle is its own circle unto itself. So, but I feel like I definitely miss that, and yeah, I loved when we worked together, and I loved when we, you know, one of the things that I really loved really love about our dynamic, even now, is that when either of us find something new that we're really into, we will almost always share with the other person. The other person's response is almost instantly like, oh, that's so cool. Even if it's not something they're 100%, it's like, that's amazing. That's really cool. And so while I miss, yes, the Coven, and I can have moments where I miss that and I miss that vibe, I feel like so many of the good things just carried on in our relationship after that I don't really truly grieve it, in a sense, you know? Like I feel like, yeah. So that's kind of, and I feel like you would be welcome in a circle of mine any time of day, for sure. Whether it was just us or whether it was, you know, my own coven or whatever, I would definitely feel comfortable with you. I would definitely vouch for you any day. I definitely learned so much from you. I still learn from you, and I feel like, you know, it's a true blessing that we're in each other's lives, and I'm very grateful for that. For sure.
Me too, and I still learn from you.
Oh, that's very kind. I appreciate that. I feel like we have one of those relationships. For me, true family, and not even just friendships, true family is when you can go for long periods of time on your own path, and then you come together, and it was like you just saw each other yesterday. And I feel like we've always had that, you know? I feel like even when we get together, it's just like we don't even necessarily always talk about all the things that have happened between, because there's no real need, you know. It's not one of those relationships of, it is like very much like, oh, it's like I just saw you, so why would I even think to bring up this thing that happened, however, you know what I mean, like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, we still always interact. And so we're just like boosting each other on this journey too. We're each other's like life coaches when we
Yeah.
need to be, you know what I mean?
That's such a
Like,
great way of
keep
putting it
going.
though. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so true.
Like, you got it. You
Yeah.
know, you can do it. You're on the right path. You know, I think you're where you need to be. And like, we just give each other that advice when we need to hear it. At times when we were like, when I steered my path and you kept going, you know, and you're like, are you okay with this? I'm like, gosh, yes, I want you to do you. Don't ever. And you know, the fact that you were so sweet to even care, you know, that's rare, first of all. And to have that, and you know, that was beautiful. But of course, I would always just want you to do you wherever you choose to go. I love you and I want you to do that. And you've done that and you've been doing that, and that's amazing. And you support me on my path, even though my path isn't the same as your path. We still are able to talk about it and appreciate our paths, and even share experiences and still learn from each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I definitely agree with that. And I actually think that in some ways, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about it was time, you know, to kind of put the coven to rest and to move on. Because now, because we're on different paths at times, I actually learn and see things in a way that if we were on the same path, you don't always get to see. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get to learn and perceive things from another vantage point through my relationship with you, just as I do other people and stuff as well. But it's, and I think that that's a real blessing. That's a great thing. And I'm also really proud of us in the sense of I have known other people and I have seen people come from, you know, not necessarily coven structure and you know, kind of put to rest and move on, but from like, you know, big relationships and dynamics, and then not be able to rise, you know, like phoenixes from that fire kind of thing, and to move on. And but that's something that we have been able to do, and so I'm so grateful and I'm thankful, and you're so cool.
And so are you.
And until next time, I wish you dark and wild blessings.